Hello and welcome to the Heat Check podcast, the Miami Herald's Miami Heat podcast. I'm David Wilson. I'm joined, as always, on the other line by Anthony Chiang, our Heat beat writer here at the Herald. Anthony, what's going on?
Nothing much, David. How are you? I feel. By the way, it feels like this has been just like every week a different narrative. Like one week it's bad, one week it's good, one week it's bad, one week it's good. I guess that's why they're basically a 500 team at this point.
Right, exactly. Honestly, maybe that's where we should start on this week's episode because, as you say, last week we came on and it was like panic mode, right? They had lost
4 straight.
It was right after the road trip, right? So they lost 4 in a row. Now we come back. They've won 3 in a row, but could lose tonight. We're recording this Wednesday morning. They played the Celtics in Boston tonight. Our colleague Barry Jackson is in the building. Jimmy Butler is not, I guess, or will not be suiting up. So who knows what's going to happen tonight? But I think we didn't have it on our rundown that we just went through, but just the kind of the herky-jerky whiplash nature of this Heat season, as you noted, like that's kind of what happens when you're a 500 team, but not always, right? Like you don't have, sometimes 500 teams don't have streaks like this, right? They're just like, mediocre, right? They lose one and then win the next and lose one and win the next 2 and then lose 2 in a row. But this Heat team has really been, obviously a lot of it has to do with some of the injuries they've had, but has really kind of had these stretches where they look, I don't want to say incompetent, but look bad, right? They look like maybe not a playoff team. And then some stretches, which, the last couple of nights, it's not like they've like beaten championship contenders, right? But they've at least still playing shorthanded, have looked pretty good for a team that's playing, without its best player for the most part here over the last couple of weeks. Well, I guess what do you make of that back and forth nature we have seen to this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the injuries, right? Like they have different guys available pretty much every game, and like for the last 2 weeks, it's been like 9 or fewer available each game,
right.
And most of that was without Jimmy and Tyler. Some of it was without Jimmy, Tyler, and Bam, so I think that has kind of played a role in it. And also, they've looked bad at stretches and they've lost 4 in a row, obviously, at one point this year. But they really don't get blown out. It's like they've played them tied for the most clutch games in the NBA at 15. So 15 of their 21 games have really come down to the final few minutes. Like even on that road trip where they were 0-4. They were leading at halftime, I think, of 3 of the 4 games, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
3 of the games, they were leading in the fourth quarter, I think. Like, they could have easily won a couple of those games. You're 2-2, and that's a totally different outlook. So some of it, I think, is just losing, like, bad balance in some of these close games, and a lot of it, I think, is just the injuries.
Yeah, I guess that's maybe what it is. When you talk about 500 teams, really what happens with 500 teams is you're in a lot of close games.
Yeah,
and they tend to break 50-50. That's why teams that have a good record and are playing a lot of close games, the common assumption is they're going to come back to earth, or vice versa. If you're losing a lot of close games, you're going to regress to the mean.
Good. And they're 7-8 right now in clutch games, so that kind of shows you like that's where they are. They're 500.
Yeah, right. Team. Yeah, good teams avoid those clutch games altogether, right? Like, I know the Celtics, when they got really hot down the stretch last year, they were just like blowing teams out. It was like leave no doubt, and that this Heat team just isn't, even with the bad teams, right? The way you pad your record is by not playing close games against bad competition. And every game is close. 15 of how many?
Of 21. 15 of 21.
15 of 21. Yeah.
Yeah, and like the team with the fewest clutch games are the Bucks, which kind of shows like they're just dominant. Like I don't think
teams
it's
with the fewest clutch games are either the really good or the really bad teams. And usually the really good teams, because even the really bad teams play close games quite a bit because the way NBA works with 3-point shooting and all that kind of stuff.
Lakers have the second most clutch games.
Yeah,
the other end of the spectrum of the Bucks. So yeah, I don't think it's like
they've been playing better later.
They've been playing better, but still. I don't think it's like a terrible sign that the Heat are playing so many close games. Obviously, it means they're competitive, but obviously, like you said, it's not the best sign.
It means they kind of are what their record says.
Right now,
they can get better, but right now they are what their record says.
And again, some of that's injuries, but if you're one of the best teams in the NBA, ideally you're not going to be playing a lot of close games.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's jump on the narrative, because that's what we tend to do every time we come on. It seems like these podcasts, as we said, have really synced up nicely with like the next day. It kind of feels like they win, or if they've been on a losing streak, they win. Or if they've been on a winning streak, they lose. This has been a pretty good week for the Heat, though. Again, considering the injuries they've been dealing with, to get 3 wins in a row. Is this, again, we've kind of had this conversation a couple times, but this is 3 in a row now, right? And doing it without Jimmy. Have they stabilized? Do you think they have, after that road trip that, again, like we said, probably, if they go 2-2, which they easily could have, I think the narrative is a lot different coming out of that. Get a couple of wins with all their dudes missing. I don't know. Do you see this trending finally in the right direction, where now we are not going to be talking about the Heat, what's wrong? I mean, obviously we're always going to talk about what's wrong with the Heat, because that's what we do as Miamians. But are we at the point where it's like they're a playoff team, they're going to be okay from now on? Do you think they have stabilized a little bit here?
I guess. I mean, they won 3 in a row, so it's hard to say they haven't stabilized. It's just, I mean, no offense, David, but the Wizards just are not great. And
no, they're
like 2 home wins.
Gritty.
Yeah, I mean, they're not like the worst team in the NBA, obviously, but they're just, the 2 wins against the Wizards is not going to change my opinion about the season. It was impressive they did it with all the injuries they're dealing with. Right. And also, by the way, like, Kyle Lowry is not in the injury report, but he is very sick. Like, if you see him in the locker room, at least the last few games, the last one against Washington and then against the Hawks on Sunday, extremely sick. Like just a cold, and it's been going around the team. So like, guys are injured, guys are playing really sick. And to win 3, that's an accomplishment. We don't do it without your best player. So I think they have stabilized somewhat, but it's going to take a little bit more of a sustained stretch for me to really like be like, okay, they found an answer. And especially like, we don't know what's going to look like when they're healthy, right? Like, I think the conversation we have to have too is like Bam Adebayo, right? This might be arguably the best stretch of his NBA career that he's in right now. I know it's a short stretch, but like the last 4 or 5 games, like starting with that Phoenix game, and really the last 2 scoring over 30.
He had some pretty good moments on the road too, even though I know people were probably frustrated with him by the end of that Minnesota game, but the second half of that road trip, he was really good.
It looks like he's turning the corner offensively. It really does. But the question is, can he do this with Jimmy's back, right? Like, can he? Obviously, it's different spacing, different opportunities within the offense when Jimmy's in there. I mean, Jimmy's your best player. He's either your leading scorer or second leading scorer. So I think that's, we have to wait and see what's going to look like when Jimmy's back. And also, I just want to see it more and see them maybe stack some wins against some better teams.
Yeah.
To really feel like, okay, things have turned.
Yeah, I mean, this, again, all 3 of those games were clutch games again, right?
Yeah,
like they were games that easily could have gone either way. And if you're looking for wins against good teams, Boston, at Memphis, is a really, really tough stretch Wednesday night, and then this weekend. So
honestly, if they get one of those 3, and you end this trip 2-2, a pretty tough trip, because even Atlanta, like, there wasn't an easy game in Atlanta.
Yeah, playoff team.
And without Jimmy for at least 2 of the games, like, you take that, right? So they've set themselves up well. They really, to have like a successful trip, you just need one of these last 3.
Yeah, and that would go a long way, because again, there's 2 parts to this equation for the Heat. One is just like they're losing to bad/mediocre teams and playing too many close games. Number 2, they kind of still just don't have a lot of impressive wins, right? Like the Phoenix game that we dedicated like a whole podcast to a few weeks ago.
Right.
And they probably lose 4 in a row after that. Golden State, but Golden State is, I mean, I'm not giving up on Golden State, but not as impressive a win, I think, as it maybe looked at that moment.
Yeah.
So
honestly, Atlanta was probably one of the more impressive wins.
Yeah, exactly. At Atlanta, at Portland, Portland's been better than people expected, but like really the marquee wins have kind of been few and far between for this team, which would be okay if the record was better and they were just beating up on. But right now, this team is not beating up on bad teams, and they're also not beating good teams with any sort of regularity. And again, we're saying this all after they've won 3 in a row without Jimmy Butler, and it's like not the worst moment for the Heat this year, But yeah, as you said, there's still not everything is solved just because of a winning streak. Although they had to get those, like, they kind of had to start piling up some wins. And it's hard to beat a team, not a back-to-back with the Wizards, right? They had Thanksgiving in between, but 2 games in 3 days, hard to beat a team like that. At Atlanta, like you said, tough win. Like, those are not super impressive wins, but to get those wins, like, those are all, like, I don't know, B+ victories for the Heat or whatever, B+ victories.
Yeah, and like, to put things into perspective, like, everything is still in front of the Heat. Yeah, the season can start the way they're 2.5 games out of 5, like 2.5 games out of the 4th seed.
Yeah,
and the Pacers are 4. Like, do you think the Pacers are going to finish ahead of the Heat when it's all said and done?
Baby.
They look really good, but I kind of be surprised, right? So it's still there for them. Like, it's still very early, but they do have issues to still solve. And like, I want to talk about Bam because I want to discuss some of the positives, and Bam has definitely been a positive. But we've talked about this every week. The biggest issue I see, and I think the most interesting part of this Heat season so far, and maybe it's not interesting to some people, but the fact that they've been playing so much zone.
Right.
Some of it is injuries, but I just think the splits between the zone and the man are concerning. Like, are they just going to play zone all season long? Like, is that going to, because the man isn't working. They have the second worst man defense in the league. And again, some of that's injuries, but even when they were healthy, their man defense was not good. So are they just going to stick with zone and hope that teams can't figure it out all year? I just think it's super interesting, kind of like how they're utilizing it. Obviously, it's a NBA record, but B, like, how they haven't really figured out how to fix their man defense yet.
I gotta say, it's not a good moment for zone defense because Syracuse basketball is really, 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 really bad. So not a great sign if you're trying to run zone. Although Syracuse now runs more man than they ever have, so maybe it is a good sign if you want to run zone. Stick to the zone; it works.
I just that's my biggest thing. Like, is this sustainable? Because at some point they have to play man, right? Like, so until I see them like correct their issues on that end with that scheme, I just don't know if this is like, right now they're just trying to win every game they can and just try to fight and claw their way to wins because they need.
They just need wins.
They need win. They stack wins and the guys are hurt, but long-term formula, like, I still think there's so many things they need to kind of address before we could say, oh, this team has it going,
Yeah. Could they play zone? Like, it's not going to work in the playoffs. I know it worked in the bubble playoffs, but that was because it was the knuckleball then, right? Like, they had
you're not using it 60 possessions,
right? And then they threw it out toward the end of the Celtics series, and the Celtics had no answer for it. I don't think in a full 7-game series, like, it works because you've run it a couple times. The other team figures out how to break a zone. Like, they've been doing that since they were 5 years old. But in the regular season, could it kind of work? Like, I've never really thought about it. But, like, if the Heat are the only, I know they're not the only team running zone, but they run it way more than anyone else. Might have
not even close.
Like it. Like, it's kind of like, it's weird. It's like the inverse of how it works. Syracuse always tends to do better in the NCAA tournament because they're playing these teams not from the ACC or the Big East in the day that
were used to it
for the zone, and they destroyed a number 1 in the country Indiana team one year to get to the Final Four by doing that. I think it kind of got Tom Crean fired. Heat, very, very important Heat figure, Tom Crean. But
Dwayne Wade, Victor Oladipo,
exactly. And then in the NBA, it's the opposite because if you're in a 7-game series, they're going to figure out the zone, right? It's like you're playing a schedule with them. And then the regular season, could it work if the Heat, you're seeing zone once every month when you play the Heat? Like, it kind of feels like it could, like you said, it's not sustainable. Like, there's a reason no one else does it. Definitely not going to work in the playoffs. But, like, as you said, it's just stack wins. It's not the worst idea in the world.
No, and it's worked, honestly. Like, all of a sudden, 2 weeks ago, the Heat were like 20th in defense. Now they're in the top 10.
Yeah.
And it's not because of their man defense. It's because their zone has been so effective. They're using their zone on 30% of their defensive possessions.
Yeah.
30%. And like over the last week or two, it's probably like 70%.
Right.
Because they've
when Jimmy's out,
guys,
like,
But the splits again are like second worst man defense, like top 3 zone defense. And the fact they've been so good on zone has negated their struggles in man, and they're a top 10 defensive unit. Like, that's crazy. Like, to me, that's why it's like just fascinating to me, like how things are kind of unfolding and how the Heat are kind of, trying to survive on the defensive end at this point because there's so many holes with their man-to-man. I maybe he continues it. I am fascinated by it. Like I at first I was like, this is not gonna, he can't continue doing this, but it's working. So
quarter of the way in, and they're still just doing it.
Why go away from it? So we'll see.
I think I asked you this same question last week. Why? I mean, you mentioned the injuries, obviously, and we haven't seen Jimmy out there. I don't, not since the last time we recorded, right? So it's not like we're getting a better sample size of why this man has issues. But why do you think this man defense is struggling in a way that, on paper, this team that should be the bread and butter when you got Jimmy, Bam, and Kyle Lowry?
They've had a lot of struggles with pick and roll coverage this year. Their pick and roll defense has not been good. And again, some of that's injuries, but some of it, like even when they were healthy, they were just having a lot of miscues. I don't know if it's like just getting used to different lineups, and that was just an early season thing that they never got to fix because guys haven't been together over the past month because of all the injury issues. And some of it is 3-point shooting. Honestly, like it's not sustainable at them. I don't think the man is going to be that bad. I don't think the zone is going to be this great. Like some of it's just like teams are shooting, I think 29% from three against the zone, and they're shooting like 39% from three against the man. And in there, I'm sure there may be a little more open shots in the man because teams are into the paint easier and driving kicks because the Heat's issues against pick and rolls. But some of it's just teams are making more shots against the man. So, but bottom line is like the man defense hasn't been that good, and they're gonna have to solve that to have any long-term success in the playoffs. Unless they become the first team ever to win a championship by just playing 80 possessions of zone a game. That would be a great storyline.
It would honestly be awesome.
It'd be cool. I mean, I'm all for it, but we've never seen it happen.
Jim Bam would hang a banner for that.
I mean, he'd have to go to the finals, right? Like he'd be there. I think Spo would have to hire him as assistant coach or something.
Oh, that would be great for Syracuse if they hired Jim Bam away these days. It's not looking very good for the Orange.
But yeah, we just never have seen it, so it's hard to expect that to actually work at that level in that stage.
All right, so we're about halfway into this podcast, and we barely mentioned Bam Adebayo when that has probably been the single biggest story.
We're so negative. We're so negative.
I know. We got sidetracked. I was planning on getting Bam to like second topic here, but we got into the zone. I got to vent a little bit about Syracuse. It was the natural flow of the conversation. But anyway, Bam, you touched on it. Probably the best little stretch of his career. 38 points against the Wizards on Friday. Follows it up with 32 against Atlanta on Sunday. How about this? Has he turned the corner? If the Heat, we're waiting to pass judgment on whether the Heat has turned the corner, but has Bam turned the corner with what we've seen? Again, the last couple of games, but the last week. But I even think there were some really good moments going back to the Phoenix game. Right, that was kind of. They obviously went on the road after that and lost 4 in a row. But he's over the last 8 games. Then I'd say he's been like pretty awesome for the most part.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that he's a better offensive player, right? And we've seen him like he develops more offensive tools every year. Like, he comes back a better player offensively every year, so that's not a surprise. But I think some of it is just more opportunity because Jimmy's out. So I still want to see what it looks like when Jimmy's playing. Like, is he going to go back to a guy who takes 10, 12 shots a game and scores 18 points, which is fine. But if he continues scoring 25 points a game on 16 shots, he's not going to take 20 shots when Jimmy's there. But you can just up it a little bit. Like, I think that's a good sign. So I still want to see what it's going to look like when Jimmy's there. But naturally, like we've talked about, the spacing when Bam and Jimmy are on the court isn't great. Yeah. So there's more space for Bam to operate when Jimmy's not in there. I'm not saying they're a better team without Jimmy, but for Bam individually, it's easier for him offensively. So I think that's played a little, that's helped Bam during this stretch. But no doubt, finishing against length, he's gotten better. He's better at getting to his spots. Each of his 28 made baskets in the last 2 games have come inside the paint, which I think says something. He's a guy that last year he depended a lot on that mid-range 16-footer, at the elbow that wasn't really not an efficient shot.
It was a good link. It was a good tool to have in the toolbox, but can't be your go-to
No,
weapon, which it kind of felt like it was.
it
Too
felt like it
last year.
was, but this year, or at least the first couple weeks, he did take that shot a lot actually.
Yeah.
But the last like 2 or 3 weeks, he's really made an effort and an adjustment to just pretty much all of his shots are coming in the paint. Even the jumpers, like those little short jumpers that are from like kind of the in between range.
Right, you're not even really taking a jumper at that
free
point.
throw
Like,
line. Yeah, it's like a push
or
shot.
floater.
Yeah. So it's just it's the way he's getting his shots. It's the way he's getting to his spots. It's his shot selection. He's getting, I think he's more effective as a roller now. His pick and roll game with Tyler is great. So yeah, he's continuing to evolve and grow. And I think we're doing a disservice to Bam when we compare him to Draymond Green, right? I think that's the easy comparison. He's a much better offensive player than Draymond Green.
Yeah.
Draymond's great, but he's a much better offensive player than Draymond Green. I don't think that's even close. Like if Bam was on a team, this roster without Jimmy, he'd average 25 points a game. Easily.
Yeah.
I think. So Bam is a good offensive player. Is he a 3-point shooter yet? No. But he's getting a lot better on the basket, and that's been evident over this stretch.
Yeah, I kind of, a couple of years ago, the whole thing was Bam needs to shoot threes. Bam needs to shoot threes. I kind of think that like ship has sort of sailed. Like, and I think that's good. I don't think that's what I mean. Like you said, it would have helped spacing if either he or Jimmy could be a 35% 3-point shooter. It'd make a huge difference. But I think, first of all, this team, the rebounding issues have been well documented with this team, with how small they play. You need Bam around the rim for that, one. Not that the Heat are ever going to be like a really aggressive offensive rebounding team, but, you get a couple extra possessions when he's playing around the rim. And again, it's just more efficient for him. He's better suited to play near the basket. Like think of like we saw them play the Wolves last week. And I know a lot of Minnesota fans get frustrated by how much Towns is out on the perimeter. Like, sure, he's a good 3-point shooter, but it's a lot better making layups. For even unless you're in the top echelon of basketball of shooters, and there's more of them now, obviously, and there's some centers who probably aren't far off from it either. Layup is going to be a more efficient shot all the time, right? It's not just threes, right? That's not the analytical recipe. It's not just shooting threes. It's shooting threes and getting layups
and getting shots in the paint. Yeah. And just because like Bam is getting into the paint consistently, it doesn't mean he's getting all of his shots at the rim. He's actually not. Like, he's taking some of the among the most shots in non-rim twos, like just in the paint, but not at the rim.
Right.
Which that's kind of been his bread and butter right now. And I think that's important because we play a team like the Bucks. We've seen Bam struggle against that drop where they sag off of him, right? Where he just kind of settles for that mid-range jumper or passes up on that shot. Now he has that little in-between jumper where he can dribble into Brook Lopez, who may be sagging into the paint, and kind of shoot over him, a little push shot, right? Like we've kind of seen him.
It's like, not to compare him to Giannis, but it's like what Giannis did a couple years ago, where before a couple years ago all he could do was dunk, and then the year they win the finals, all of a sudden he's got that little push shot, and it changes everything.
It's important. So I think definitely, like, I don't know, I'm not going to say like Bam's turned the corner because, again, I don't know what it's going to look like when Jimmy's in there, but I think Bam is definitely a better offensive player, and that's huge for this team. Long term, like, that's probably been the best like development so far this season is just Bam continuing to grow offensively and showing kind of new shots that he has in his bag that are going to be useful against really good defenses in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'd say the two biggest positives from the last couple of weeks are Bam and Kyle Lowry.
And Caleb, by the way.
Caleb, yeah.
Caleb looks really, really good too. Like, all of a sudden, PJ Tucker, who you never measure PJ Tucker by stats, but Caleb is having, I think, a better season than PJ at this point.
Yeah.
Like, the way he's shooting threes, the way he's kind of found his spot in the offense, as not only as a spacer, but a guy who could create for others and also score on his own, like create his own shot. He's gotten a lot better too, and that's big for this offense as well.
Yeah. Going back to Bam, I think the nitpick has never been necessarily his skill on offense. It's been his aggression and
assertiveness.
Obviously, his best stretches, scoring wise, have kind of always come with Jimmy out, right? And that's natural. I still always think of that Brooklyn game during the COVID year where I think Jimmy was out and they were down to like 7 or 8 guys, and he think scored 40 in that game, maybe more.
Yeah, I think it was career high. It was like 42 or something like that.
Yeah. So obviously it's always going to coincide with your best offensive player being out. But I think just so for him, what I'm more interested in is just finding ways to just keep getting more and more efficient and more ways to score in different types of lineups, right? And I think, like you said, he's kind of done that this year by just being a more efficient scorer in the paint. And I think taking better shots. And obviously, when Jimmy gets back, is he going to take more mid-range jumpers? Probably, right? Because Jimmy's going to get into the paint and draw guys in, and then that elbow jumper is going to be there more often than it is right now when he's the guy driving a lot of the offense. But you're seeing right now, and he's not always going to play with Jimmy, obviously. They're going to stagger them sometimes. So I think what we're seeing right now is just, it's I don't want to say natural progression, because obviously some guys don't progress like this year over year, especially, Bam is still young, but he's kind of getting to the point where guys start to kind of hit their peak.
Sure, yeah.
But I think we're seeing for me, what I'm more interested in than the shot volume is the shot efficiency, and
right.
I think
and the consistency
that is what we're seeing, right? And the consistency of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he can't have games where he only takes 6 or 8 shots or whatever, like he does sometimes. But I think I'm much more interested in, rather than what can he do with 17 shots, I'm more interested in like what can he do with 12, 13, 14.
Yeah. And then look, and there's still plenty of room for him to grow. Like I'm looking at, and his field goal percentage is down. And you look at the shot he's taking the most, like the non-rim paint shot, he's taking the 4th most in the NBA behind Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Trae Young, and Jalen Brunson. He's shooting 43% on that shot, which is basically league average. For his volume, that's a good number. And for his volume, that's fine. But like look at Kevin Durant, who's hasn't taken that much fewer than him. He's shooting 61% of those shots. I'm not saying Bam is ever going to shoot 60% on that shot, but like if he can get closer to 50%, that's a huge difference. So there's still room for him to grow. But I just think what we've seen this first month plus of the year, and especially the last 2 weeks, has been encouraging.
Kyle, we touched on it quickly. You mentioned playing sick. Like I said, he's probably been the other big bright spot, I would say, over the last few weeks. He's Kyle Lowry, and he's going to probably miss some time down the stretch. And you worry about his health come playoff time. But how encouraged have you been by what you've seen from him over these last 2 weeks, basically? I guess
very encouraged, because lately, last few weeks and for like a few games, he had to be like the go-to guy, right?
Like,
Tyler, Bam, and Jimmy were out, and he got a triple-double. He had his highest scoring first half or half ever in the NBA, which was insane. Like you never thought that would happen this season at this stage of his career. So it's been really encouraging. I think just the fact that he's remained healthy, right? And he's playing, last I checked, he has played the 2nd most minutes in the NBA, which again, not ideal, but the fact that he's able to do it, it's a good sign. So yeah, I think, when everyone is back, he can kind of slide back into that 4th option, and he's shown he's more than capable of doing that, right? Like he can, if he's your 4th option, you have a really good team. So he'll fit right back into that role. But yeah, it'll still be like they still hadn't figured it out, right? Like Kyle was taking like 4 or 5 shots when everyone was healthy, because there were so many guys who needed the ball. So they still have things to work out, but I think Kyle has kind of seen that he can still do it if he needs to. I think the Heat has kind of seen what he's capable of, and hopefully that will kind of coincide with him playing a bigger role in the offense, even with, when guys get back.
I said I don't worry too much about Bam Adebayo field goal attempts. I worry about Kyle Lowry. Like, you're only taking 4 shots, you can't do that. Like, you're the point guard. You have the ball.
You have to take 10 shots at least. Yeah.
Even if they're threes, like even if they're like you swing the ball and you got an open look, you got to take it with the way this team is designed. All right, I think we can close things out there. Follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony_Chiang. Barry's got the rest of this road trip, right? He's up in Boston for the next 2.
Yeah.
And
I'll be doing Memphis. You're doing Memphis. Yeah, but I'll do it from home.
So, okay, gotcha.
So, yeah.
Gotcha. So, be sure to follow him and our colleague Barry Jackson. You can follow me on Twitter at DBWilson2.
You have a lot more time on your hands these days.
I know. No, I don't have to book a flight to Birmingham, Alabama, or anything like that.
There's no chance, right? No chance at a bowl at this point.
No chance. No chance.
I know academically you could
No
qualify.
chance.
Okay.
They're too far down that list. I mean, I guess if a bunch of teams turned down bowls, like theoretically they could get it, but like there are, I think they're like 5th or 6th on the list, and I think there is at most going to be 2 5 and 7 teams get in, so you would need quite a few teams to turn it down.
Okay.
And then there's like a couple other teams, like New Mexico State might get in at 5 and 6 because they had a game canceled.
Sure, yeah.
So, but anyway, I'm going to San Jose. It's not really San Francisco. San Jose for Dolphins this weekend, so that should be fun.
Really? That's fun. That's cool.
It's definitely the most fun team in town right now, I would say. So anyway, I think that wraps it up for us. Thanks as always for listening, and we will talk to you guys next week.